In 1968, a Marine on a 2-week patrol ate the same canned meal so many times his squad believed saying its real name out loud brought bad luck. They called it something you cannot print. It is number 1 on this list. Number 14 kept more men alive than any steak ever did. And number 3, soldiers cooked it over a block of plastic explosive because there was nothing else to burn. Real GIs ate things that would clear a modern dinner table without a word. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down. Number 25, chopped ham and eggs. This was breakfast in a can, and the men gave it a nickname that told you everything. They called it HE, which stood for high explosive, because of what it did to a soldier's stomach a few hours after he ate it. The eggs were reconstituted, chopped, and packed cold into a green tin about the size of a hockey puck. Opened with a P38 can opener, the contents came out grayish and gelatinous, holding the exact shape of the can. Soldiers ate it because it was there, and because a body burning through the jungle needed the calories. Roughly 300 of them in that little tin. Heated over a small fire, it firmed up into something almost like a real scramble. Cold, straight out of the can at dawn before a patrol moved out, it went down like wet cement. But it was protein, and protein was survival. The bloating and gas that followed became a running joke in every squad. One nobody found funny at 3 in the morning on a listening post. Number 24, beans and Frankfurter chunks in tomato sauce. Officially, it was a respectable entree. Unofficially, GIs took one look at the pale pink sausage pieces floating in the sauce and named it something so crude it cannot be repeated here. A name that rhymed with the shape of the meat. That name stuck for the entire war. What made this one bearable, even genuinely liked by some, was the tomato sauce. After weeks of gray meat and bland starch, anything with acid and sweetness felt like a gift. Men heated the can over a heat tab until the sauce bubbled at the edges, then crumbled crackers into it to thicken the whole thing into a stew. A few drops of hot sauce turned it into something a hungry man could actually look forward to. It was filling, it held together, and the beans delivered slow-burning fuel for a long day humping a rucksack through elephant grass. Crude name aside, when the resupply chopper dropped a case of these, nobody was throwing them into the trade pile. Number 23, beef slices with potatoes in gravy. This was the closest thing the C ration lineup offered to a Sunday dinner, and the men knew it. Thin slabs of pressed beef sat in a brown gravy alongside a few chunks of potato, all of it swimming in enough fat to keep it edible after months in a warehouse. Cold, it congealed into a solid disc you could tip out of the can whole. Heated properly, the gravy loosened, and the beef softened into something that, if you closed your eyes and were tired and hungry enough, almost tasted like a pot roast your mother forgot about on the stove. Soldiers learned to save the cracker unit from another meal, crumble it in, and stretch this into a heartier one-can supper. It was heavy, greasy, and dense with calories, exactly what a man needed after 12 hours of patrolling. In the barter economy that ran through every unit, beef and potatoes traded up, never down. Number 22, meat chunks with beans and tomato sauce. If beans and Franks were the crude cousin, meatballs and beans were the respectable relative everyone was glad to see. Small pressed meatballs, navy or pinto beans, and that same tomato base combined into something that genuinely resembled a plate of home cooking after you doctored it. The trick every experienced grunt learned was patience and heat. Cold, the fat sat on top in a white film that turned a man's stomach. But set the can on a stove made from another empty can, punched with holes. Drop in a burning heat tab and wait until it steamed. The fat melted into the sauce, the meatballs plumped, and the whole thing transformed. Add crushed crackers and a shake of Tabasco, and you had a chili that would have passed muster at a county fair. It cost the Army pennies to produce and delivered the fat and protein that hard labor in a 100-degree jungle demanded. Number 21, spaghetti and meatballs in tomato sauce. Here was a taste of Little Italy dropped into the middle of a rice paddy. The noodles came soft, almost mushy, tangled in a sweetish red sauce with a few meatballs scattered through. Purists back home would have wept, but in the field, this was a prize. There was something about pasta, about the shape and the sauce, that reached past the monotony and touched a memory of a real kitchen. Men heated it slowly so the noodles did not scorch on the bottom of the can, stirring with the flat plastic spoon that came in every accessory pack. The Charlie Ration Cookbook, a real booklet the Tabasco company mailed to soldiers, had recipes built around exactly this can, suggesting a shake of pepper sauce and a handful of crumbled crackers to turn it into something worth sitting down for. For a 19-year-old a world away from a Friday night spaghetti dinner, this can was more than food. It was a postcard from home. Number 20, boned chicken. White meat chicken, boned and packed in its own broth, was one of the milder and more forgiving cans in the rotation. It had no strong flavor to offend and no gristle to fight, which made it a favorite of men whose stomachs had been wrecked by dysentery, bad water, or the endless grease of everything else. The broth mattered as much as the meat. On a brutally hot day, a soldier could drink that salty liquid straight and replace some of what he had sweated out. The chicken itself pulled apart into shreds that could be mixed with rice, begged from a village, spread on crackers, or simmered with whatever else was on hand into a thin soup. It was the can you gave a sick buddy, the one that stayed down when nothing else would. Bland was not an insult in the jungle. Bland was mercy. Number 19, chicken and noodles in broth. This was comfort food stripped to its bones, a thin broth with a few egg noodles and small pieces of chicken bobbing through it. It was never anyone's first pick, but it earned a quiet loyalty for one reason. When a man was sick, and in that climate men were sick constantly, this went down easy and stayed put. The warmth of it, even lukewarm, settled a churning gut better than anything else in the case. Soldiers doctored it hard to give it life, adding hot sauce, crumbled crackers, a stolen bouillon cube, sometimes a bit of instant coffee for a strange, bitter depth. On a cold, wet night during monsoon season, when a man had been soaked to the skin for hours and could not remember being warm, a hot canteen cup of this broth was a small resurrection. It asked nothing of a tired body except to swallow, and it gave back exactly enough to keep going. Number 18, pork slices cooked in their own juices. Cured pork slices packed in fat and juice were among the better meat cans, rich and salty and dense with the calories a soldier burned by the thousand every day. The fat was the whole point. In a diet this monotonous and this hard on the body, fat was flavor, fat was fuel, and fat was what made a bland ration feel like a meal instead of a punishment. Men fried the slices in their own grease on an improvised stove until the edges browned and crisped, filling a foxhole with a smell that carried on the wind. Layered onto crackers with a smear of cheese spread, it became a passable sandwich. One old Marine remembered building exactly that, a warmed slice of ration ham with cheese, and calling it the best thing he ate for a week. It was simple, greasy, and satisfying in the deep way that only fat and salt can satisfy a body pushed to its limit. First pattern break. Here is where the story stops being about cons and starts being about survival. None of this food was meant to be eaten cold, and yet cold is how most of it went down, because building a fire in enemy country was a good way to get killed. So soldiers got clever. The tiny P-38 can opener, the folding blade every GI wore on his dog tag chain. Opened cans, cleaned fingernails, stripped rifles, and dug foxholes. Marines called their can opener a John Wayne, because supposedly only he was tough enough to need one. For heat, the Army issued trioxin fuel tabs, small blue bricks that burned with a faint chemical stink. When those ran out, men reached for something the Army definitely did not intend. They pinched off a marble-sized ball of C4, the plastic explosive, and lit it. C4 does not blow up when you set it on fire. It burns hot and fast and boils a can of coffee in under a minute. The trick, learned the hard way, was never to stomp it out. That was the difference between dinner and a trip home in a bag. Number 17, John Wayne crackers and cheese spread. The crackers were round, dense, and hard enough that men swore only John Wayne could bite through one, which is how they got the name. Dry, they were nearly inedible, a jaw-cracking hardtack that soaked up moisture from your mouth and left you thirstier than before. But paired with the cheese spread, they became the reliable backbone of 100 field meals. That processed cheese, sometimes studded with pimentos or caraway seeds, came in its own small can and spread thick and rich across the cracker. Men heated the cheese until it went molten, then poured it over crumbled crackers for a crude fondue. Others built cracker and cheese stacks to gnaw on during the long, silent hours of night watch. It was the snack that filled the gaps between meals, the thing a soldier stuffed in a cargo pocket for the trail. Simple, shelf-stable, and endlessly combinable, the cracker and cheese unit was the duct tape of the sea ration case. Number 16, peanut butter. The peanut butter that came in the ration was a different animal from what waited at home. Stiff, oily, and stubborn, it clung to the roof of your mouth and refused to let go, which is why men joked it made a better sealant than a spread. Some genuinely used it that way, patching gear or greasing threads. But its real value was calories, a huge, dense payload of them in a tiny can, exactly what a starving body on a long patrol needed. Spread on a John Wayne cracker, it turned that inedible brick into something you could actually eat, the oil softening the cracker just enough. Mixed with a crumbled fruitcake bar or a bit of cocoa powder, it became a rough field candy that men rationed out to themselves like treasure. It was the last thing eaten when everything else ran out, the emergency fuel packed in the bottom of the ruck, the thing that kept a man moving when the resupply bird did not come. Number 15, canned white bread and pound cake. Bread in a can sounds like a joke until you have gone 3 weeks without a soft bite of anything. The canned white bread was moist, faintly sweet, and steamed itself soft inside the tin, and men treated it like a small miracle. But the real crown jewel of the baked goods was the pound cake. Dense, buttery, and sweet, it was the single most traded item in the entire ration system. A man would give up his meat, his fruit, and his cigarettes for another can of pound cake. Soldiers ate it plain, crumbled it into their coffee, or split it and smeared it with jam from the accessory pack to make a crude field pastry. There was the cinnamon nut roll too, and a compressed fruitcake bar in the long-range rations. These were the tastes that reached furthest back toward home, toward a mother's kitchen and a Sunday table, and men guarded them accordingly. Number 14, sliced peaches and fruit cocktail. If you asked 100 Vietnam veterans for the one sea ration item they still dream about, most would say the fruit. Sliced peaches, quartered pears, pineapple bits, and above all, fruit cocktail, all packed in heavy, sweet syrup, were pure liquid morale. In a diet built on grease and salt and bland starch, that cold, sweet fruit and its syrup hit a man like nothing else. The syrup got drunk straight from the can, every last drop, because a body that had sweated all day craved that sugar. Fruit cocktail was currency, worth trading 2 meat cans to get. But there was one exception, wrapped in superstition. Marines and armored crewmen believed the halved apricots were cursed, that opening a can of them meant your vehicle would break down, or worse, before the day ended. Men threw them into the brush unopened rather than risk the bad luck. The peaches, though, the peaches were sacred, saved for the end of a long day like dessert at a fine meal. Number 13, ham slices. Not to be confused with the infamous ham and lima beans, plain ham slices were one of the genuinely good cans, sitting near the top of every man's wish list. These were real slices of cured ham, salty and rich, cooked in their own juices, and ready to eat cold or hot. Warmed in the can, they released a smell that turned every head in the perimeter. Layered on crackers with cheese spread, they built the closest thing to a deli sandwich a jungle could offer. Cut up and stirred into rice, they made a passable ham-fried rice. The salt alone was worth something to a man losing it by the bucket in the heat. In a rotation full of gray mystery meat and beans nobody could love, the ham slice was proof that somewhere in a factory back home, someone had at least tried to make something a soldier would want to eat. Number 12. Instant coffee and cocoa. More than any single food, coffee was the ritual that held a man together. Every accessory packet held instant coffee, sugar, and powdered creamer, and that little pouch was the first thing many soldiers reached for at dawn. A cup of coffee boiled over a burning ball of C4 in a canteen cup was the day's first small victory, a moment of warmth and normalcy before whatever the day held. The cocoa powder was the evening version, a sweeter comfort stirred into hot water on a cold monsoon night, sometimes spiked with a bit of the creamer to make it richer. Men mixed the coffee into their pound cake, into their broth, even into cold water for a bitter jolt when there was no time to heat it. It was caffeine. It was warmth. It was a few seconds of feeling human. A soldier could complain about every other item in the box, but the coffee packet was never, ever thrown away. Second pattern break. Here is the thing the ration designers never fully solved, and the thing soldiers solved for themselves. The food was boring, and boredom in a diet wears a man down almost as fast as hunger. So two economies sprang up in every unit. The first was trade. A thriving black market ran through every squad, pound cake and peaches at the top, ham and lima beans at the bottom, everything priced by taste. Men who could not stand francs would swap them for a buddy's fruit, and whole friendships were negotiated over a case of sea rations. The second economy was flavor, and it had a hero. A Tabasco executive named Walter McElhenney, himself a Marine veteran, started getting letters from GWs begging for ways to make the rations edible. So in 1966, his company printed the Charlie Ration Cookbook, a pocket-sized booklet of recipes with names like Foxhole Dinner for Two, wrapped it around a 2-ounce bottle of Tabasco, and mailed the whole kit to soldiers for $1. That little red bottle became the most powerful weapon against monotony in the entire war. Number 11. LRRP chili con carne. For the long-range reconnaissance patrols, the small teams that vanished into enemy territory for days at a time, the heavy cans were a death sentence. Steel and water weighed too much and made noise, so the Army developed something new in 1964. A freeze-dried ration the men pronounced LRRP. Chili con carne was the favorite of the 8 menus. It came as a light, dry brick of freeze-dried meat, beans, and spice in a foil pouch, and it weighed almost nothing in the ruck. Pour in water, hot or cold, wait a few minutes, and it plumped back into a genuine, spicy, satisfying bowl of chili. With a shake of hot sauce, it was, by the standards of the field, a feast. Special Forces and Ranger teams carried 7 or 8 of these for a week-long patrol, living out of a rucksack deep in the bush. Compared to the greasy cans the regular infantry hauled, the LRRP chili felt like a secret luxury the elite kept for themselves. Number 10. LRRP beef stew and chicken stew. The beef stew and chicken stew rounded out the top of the LRRP menu, and men on long patrols came to depend on them. Freeze-dried chunks of meat, potato, and vegetable rehydrated into a thick, hot stew that filled a canteen cup and warmed a body from the inside. The genius of the design was weight. A full day's food that once meant several pounds of steel cans now fit in a pocket at a fraction of the load, which for a man walking 20 miles through triple canopy jungle was the difference between moving fast and getting caught. The stews reconstituted best with hot water, so teams that could risk a tiny fire or a burning tab got a real meal, while those who could not made do with a cold, gritty, but still edible version. After the mush and monotony of the wet cans, a hot cup of LRRP stew on a mountainside at dusk was as close to home cooking as the deep jungle ever got. Number 9. LRRP pork with scalloped potatoes. Pork with scalloped potatoes was the LRRP that split opinion. But it earned a place here for one brutal reason that had nothing to do with taste. The freeze-dried rations needed water to come alive, about 1.5 pints per pouch, and in Vietnam, water was the enemy. The streams and paddies were thick with parasites, blood flukes, and tapeworms that could put a man in a hospital for months. So a LRRP team either hauled its water in, ran it through iodine tablets that made everything taste like a swimming pool, or gambled. The scalloped potatoes soaked up the treated water and the chemical bitterness right along with it, so men learned to mask the taste with extra hot sauce. Eaten hot, it was a rich, starchy, welcome meal. Eaten cold with iodine water on a bad night, it was a reminder that in this war, even dinner carried a risk. The men ate it anyway because the alternative was an empty stomach 40 miles from help. Number 8. Freeze-dried fruit and the legendary ice cream. Tucked into some of the later long-range rations was a small marvel of technology that never failed to lift a team's spirits. Freeze-dried peaches, pears, and apricots came as light, crunchy, almost weightless pieces that men ate straight from the pouch like candy, the sugar hitting a tired body fast. And in the rarest and most talked-about LRRP packets of all came something that seemed impossible in a jungle freeze-dried ice cream. It was the same dehydrated dessert developed for astronauts, a chalky, sweet block that dissolved on the tongue into a strange, cold-flavored memory of a soda fountain back home. It did not melt, it did not spoil, and it did not require a single thing but a dry mouth to enjoy. For a filthy, exhausted team hiding in the bush, passing around a bar of space ice cream was a moment of pure, absurd joy. A reminder that somewhere the world still made things just to make people happy. Number 7. Ba Moi Ba, the 33 beer. When a unit made it back to a firebase or a town, the food and drink changed, and one bottle became legend. Ba Moi Ba, which simply meant 33, was the local Vietnamese beer, a leftover from the French colonial days, brewed in Saigon. GIs adopted it as their own, partly because it was cheap and available, and partly because the mystery of it became part of the fun. The men swore it tasted different every batch, and rumors flew that it was preserved with formaldehyde. A story almost certainly false, but repeated so often it became part of the legend. True or not, after weeks in the field on warm canteen water and iodine, a cold or even lukewarm bottle of 33 was heaven. Men drank it on sandbag bunkers at sunset, watching the tree line, trading stories. It was not about the beer. It was about the hour of feeling almost normal that came with it. Number 6. Coca-Cola. Nothing said home like a Coke, and the American war machine made sure it followed the soldiers everywhere. Whether trucked in by the case, bought from a kid selling bottles at the edge of a village, or scored warm from a firebase cooler, a Coca-Cola was a taste of the world these men had left behind. Warm and flat as it usually was, it barely mattered. That specific sweetness, that familiar burn of carbonation, snapped a man straight back to a drugstore counter in Ohio or a ball game in Georgia. Kids near the bases learned fast that GIs would pay well for a cold bottle, and a whole small economy grew up around ice and soda. Some men mixed it with whatever liquor they could find. Most just drank it slow, making it last, letting each sip do the quiet work of reminding them who they were and where they came from. In a war that took almost everything familiar away, a bottle of Coke gave a little of it back. Third pattern break. Here is what the food really cost, and it was not measured in dollars. A soldier in Vietnam could burn 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, humping a rucksack up hills in wet heat. And the rations, at roughly 1,200 calories a can, could not always keep up. Men came home lighter than they left, sometimes by 50 or 60 pounds, their frames whittled down by the work and the sickness and the sheer effort of staying alive. And the deeper truth, the one every veteran will tell you, is that hunger was rarely the worst of it. Water was. A man could go a long time on an empty stomach, but the thirst in that climate was relentless, and clean water was so scarce and so dangerous that thirst, not hunger, is what most of them remember. The food was fuel, monotony, and misery, but the search for something safe to drink was the quiet war within the war, fought every single day. Number 5. Rice from the villages. When the cans ran low or a patrol stretched longer than planned, soldiers turned to the oldest food in the country. Rice was everywhere, grown in every paddy, cooked in every village, carried by every enemy soldier in a small cloth tube slung across the chest. GIs learned to trade for it, to buy it, sometimes simply to accept a warm ball of it pressed into their hands by a village woman. Plain white rice, still steaming, was a revelation after weeks of pressed meat and congealed fat. It was clean, it was gentle on a ruined stomach, and it stretched every other scrap of food twice as far. Men mixed shredded ration chicken into it, poured meat can gravy over it, spiked it with hot sauce. A ball of rice with a bit of salted fish or a cooked egg from a villager was, for many, the best food they ate in country, precisely because it was real, made by human hands, and not sealed in a factory a year before. Number 4. Nuoc mam. No single flavor divided the American soldier from the Vietnamese landscape more than nuoc mam, the fermented fish sauce that was the beating heart of the local diet. Made from fish salted and left to break down for months, it carried a smell so powerful that GIs joked it could give away an ambush, and many men gagged the first time they got close to it. But it was everywhere, drizzled over rice, mixed into every village meal, offered freely by the people the soldiers lived among. Those who learned to get past the smell found something else underneath, a deep, salty, savory punch that turned plain rice into a meal and reminded a body starved of real flavor what food was supposed to do. Some soldiers came to crave it, hunting it down, splashing it on their rations the way they splashed on Tabasco. Others hated it to their dying day. Either way, that little bottle of fermented fish was as much a part of the war's table as any green can from home. Number 3. Jungle stew cooked over C4. This is the dish that captures the whole improvised genius of the American grunt. When the rations ran thin and a unit got its hands on fresh meat, whatever the source, water buffalo bought or bartered from a village, a chicken, sometimes game from the bush, they built a stew. Everything went into a helmet or a large empty can. The fresh meat, cut rough. Rice from a village. Whatever C ration cans were left, meat, beans, vegetables, dumped in together. Water, salt, and a long, generous pour of Tabasco to tie the whole strange mixture together. And underneath it all, a burning ball of plastic explosive, because there was no clean firewood and no time. One veteran remembered exactly this. A mulligan stew of water buffalo and C rations and rice with hot sauce stirred through, cooked in the field, and called it one of the best meals of his tour. It was ugly, it was against every rule, and it was a small triumph of hungry men refusing to eat one more cold can alone. Number 2. Snake, monkey, and whatever the jungle gave. Deep in enemy territory, far from any resupply, the long-range teams and the men who ran out of everything learned to take what the jungle offered. A large snake, a python caught crossing a trail, was skinned, cut into sections, and roasted over a hidden fire, the pale meat tasting faintly of chicken and fish. Monkey was eaten when it could be shot quietly, though many men could never bring themselves to do it, unsettled by how human the small bodies looked. There were birds, fish stunned in streams, edible plants and bamboo shoots that the enemy knew by heart, and the Americans mostly did not. This was survival at its rawest. the point where the war stripped a man down to the same animal need that had driven every soldier in every jungle since the beginning. It was not a meal anyone wrote home about. It was the food of desperation, eaten because the alternative was starving, and it kept men alive in the places the supply chain could not reach. Number 1, ham and lima beans. And here it is, the single most infamous meal of the entire Vietnam War, hated so completely that it earned a nickname too obscene to say and a superstition all its own. Officially, it was ham and lima beans. The men called it ham and something else, a name that turned pale slabs of ham and mushy, grayish-green limas in a thin gravy into a legend of misery. It had been the least favored entree since World War II and Korea, and by Vietnam, the loathing was so deep that soldiers believed even saying the real name out loud brought bad luck. They would not utter it. Men doused it in Tabasco, buried it in crackers, traded away entire meals to avoid it. And still it came back in the next case, because there was always more of it than anyone wanted. One general remembered his men strapping cans of it to a truck engine to heat them on a road march, forgetting to punch holes, and the cans exploding into a stench that clung to the vehicles for days. And yet, here is the strange truth. Every man who was there ate it, cursed it, and shared that curse with the man in the next foxhole. The hatred of ham and limas became a bond, a joke passed down a whole generation of soldiers, the one taste every one of them remembers. It was the worst food of the war. It was also, in its own miserable way, the thing that made them brothers. So there it is. 25 meals from a war fought on greasy cans, hot sauce, and pure improvisation. These men ate cold franks in the dark, drank warm 33 beer on a bunker line, and cooked buffalo stew over plastic explosive because that is what survival looked like. Drop a comment and tell me which one you would actually try, and which one you would trade away the second the case hit the ground. And if you know a veteran who carried a P-38 on his dog tags, ask him about ham and limas. I promise you he still remembers the name he refused to say.